What is up, guys? It is Stu, and it's another episode of the What the Fuck Gym Talk podcast. Got my man MDV on here. We're just swapping podcast. Came and did his a few weeks ago, and basically, man, I just want to jam and talk all things fitness. I've been slowly cutting in some fitness, content back into my life now that I've got the bandwidth to do so. And I joke around with people. I tell them all the time, like, I'm probably actually smarter in the realm of exercise science and strength and conditioning protocols than I actually am in business. Like, I'm the biggest fucking nerd. And that I've been able to kind of scratch that itch. And I believe you're the perfect, partner on this to just kind of talk shop. We were just wrapping. I've been watching the NCFlex thing come through. And cause you were the guy R&D'ing that whole thing. Like,
yes, sir.
Doing it in your garage, whatever. And then you launched it. What was the sales pitch to everyone else on your team? Like, hey guys, we have several different tracks. We don't have this track. What was the sales pitch to adding it?
Yeah, great question. Well, first of all, I was super jealous when I logged on to this podcast this morning because your arms look fucking incredible. And when you went off screen, I know that you ran the rack really quickly and came back.
I've got a pull-up rack right here. I just knocked out some pull-ups real quick. I need that pre-Zoom podcast pump.
It's very intimidating pump right now. No, so like, if anybody who doesn't know me, I've spent most of my fitness career in the functional training CrossFit realm. So I came up in 2006, did my first workout, got my level 1, 2008, coached for many, many years, was on seminar staff, did that for 4 years, coached at CrossFit New England, coached at CrossFit One Nation, coached at Reebok CrossFit One, and I run fitness and training over at NCFit. And I've had a fucking whirlwind of a career, man. I didn't think that my career was going to go this way, but it did. And I'm super glad that it did, because I get to do this awesome thing now with people who I really love and enjoy. And my viewpoints on training have changed over the years. I've never been a fundamentalist. I think the closest I got to fundamentalism was, when I was neck deep in the CrossFit doctrine and coaching on CrossFit seminar staff. And, early on there is when I was drinking the Kool-Aid at the probably highest potency. But, I never subscribed to this idea that, workouts always had to be tracked and you always had to have scores and you had to write everything down and that you had to, kill yourself for points. And, one of the things that changed in my own life was that I didn't want to feel that every single day. I put myself through the ringer in workouts for a long time, a very long time. Man, I've done Fran more times than I can count. I've done Cindy more times than I can count. I've done, a 2K row, 5K row, 1 mile time trial, 4x400, all these things that just strike fear in the fucking heart of man when you go to do them. I've done them, and I'm not trying to woe is me over here. I know you've done these too. I didn't want to feel that anymore. Like, I wanted to leave my workouts feeling really good. And I also wanted to go into my workouts without having this like nervous energy or fear or trepidation about what I was going to go do. And I think that that's okay. Do I still mix in some high intensity efforts every now and again? Yes. But the majority of my training now supplements my life and other pursuits that I have outside of the gym. And I think does so for me right now in a much healthier manner, where I'm not just smashing myself in the gym and then trying to go out and do this other thing or these other things like jujitsu and, go on hikes and all this kind of stuff, which does take a toll on your body. So, overall, I think for me right now, I'm in a really good place with my training. The intensity has definitely come down. I think from an aesthetic standpoint, from a standpoint of how I feel on a day-to-day basis, on how fitness contributes to my life outside of the gym, I think that CrossFit did me really well for a really long time. Functional training did me well for a really long time, but I'm much more enjoying this functional strength and bodybuilding approach now. And it was a little bit of a paradigm shift, like you had hinted at, at NCFit. This is something that was a bit of a curveball in comparison to our other programs that we have. We have more traditional GPP style programs and a strength and conditioning program. And, guys out there who really pioneered this space, at least as a bridge in functional training, Marcus Philly, Ryan Fisher are the two big ones that come to mind. I drew a lot of inspiration from both talking to those guys and doing some of their programming, but then also pulling in a lot of the things that I really loved about my past in bodybuilding and hypertrophy training and body weight, just developing my own strength and awareness about my body weight. That was always something I was really interested in. And it all kind of came together in a way that the NCFlex program are just the way that I look at how I would program for a week's worth of workouts to give a full body impact while allowing people to express functional strength with traditional, more heavy lifts, and then move into bodybuilding, a little bit more hypertrophy and volume. And it's not like anything else out there. It's uniquely ours. And it's been a lot of fun.
So let's talk. So that was perfect. Let's jam on that. So it took some inspiration. There's plenty of guys out there. Obviously, Marcus is going to get the hat nod for really coining the phrase and really getting after it and getting the big following on functional bodybuilding. When you guys were creating it, number one, first question, did anybody maybe that feels a little more old guard CrossFit? I know NCFit is an old guard CrossFit, but was there anyone on that was like, whoa, let's leave that to Marcus, right? Let's leave that in his department. We don't need to try to copy that. And then if so, what was your kind of counterpoint, and how have you guys exactly to the finest detail? How does that program, if I'm sitting here and looking at the two programs, what's called functional bodybuilding and NCFlex, what's the biggest difference maybe between the two?
Sure. I would tell this to Jason to his face and to Jason's credit, he's the defender of the realm of NCFit, right? He's the CEO, he's the founder, he's the guy that ultimately, the success or the failure falls on the number one guy. And I think maybe for about a year prior to the launch of NCFlex, I was in Jason's ear about, hey, dude, I'm really enjoying this new style of training. I'm enjoying experimenting with bodybuilding, with functional strength in a way that is different than how we're expressing it through our GPP program and our strength and conditioning program. I'm enjoying slowing my workouts down. I'm enjoying the kind of shorter equipment list and being able to do all of these workouts in my garage and not necessarily have as much, complexity in terms of, the gymnastics movements or the Olympic lifts. So, Jason's not, I don't think he's afraid of those ideas, but it was also a timing thing. We had to make sure that introducing this program to the NCFit catalog was the right place and the right time. And as part of the kind of evolution of what we've done and our journey, we also were reviewing or kind of reformulating an app that we had. So we have a couple of different places you can find our workouts. We have our brick and mortar gyms in California that you can come in and get a great workout. If you're a member at our gyms, NCFlex is a program that you have access to, and you can do it during open gym or you can do it at home, but you can do our classes in the gyms. If you're a member of the NCFit Collective, so other gyms who are out there who want to follow our workouts and our programming, they get access to all of the content that we produce. So they get access to Metcon, X, Flex, a whole bunch of other stuff, and you can choose to run those programs the way that you want to run them. But if you're an athlete out there, if you're just somebody who's a fan from, abroad or somewhere else in the United States, you don't have access to an NCFit gym or a collective gym, we have an app, and that app has gone through a bunch of evolution. So when it first started out, we offered everything through the app, and it was a really confusing experience. There was too much on there. It was tough to navigate if you didn't know training and functional training like the back of your hand. It was a confusing landscape. So we pulled it back, and when we pulled it back, this is around the same time that NCFlex was kind of coming to a head in conversations. And we were like, dude, this is a great time. We can go out there with NC Metcon, which is our expression of GPP. It's the closest thing that you'd find to like a CrossFit.com style workout. It's got our own unique spin on it, but a lot of variance and a lot of complexity and a lot of both ends of the spectrum and everything in between. We have NCX, which is strength and conditioning. Every day you get a core strength movement coupled with a conditioning workout that incorporates some of the skills that you learned in your strength. And we were like, man, we have an opportunity here to really, Marcus was doing his thing with functional bodybuilding. Ryan Fisher was doing his thing with, his aesthetics program and stuff like that. And we were like, this is something that one of our guys, me, was really passionate about. We were seeing the demand from some of our people asking us about these kinds of programs. And it was just the right place and the right time. And it was different enough from the other two programs that gave us 3 distinct offerings. And that's how we went out there with the new app. And it's when you log in every day to the app, you
with
get
the
those
new
3.
app,
Yeah.
can you pull data and be like, which program is being viewed the most?
Yeah, we can. We can. And
how does NCFlex stack up?
it's doing really well, dude. It's one of the main drivers to the app, which is really exciting for me because, you know, it's one of those things that I'm really championing hard right now.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see people respond to it. You know, all 3 of the programs are pretty highly utilized, but NCFlex and NCX are like kind of neck and neck for being the main program on the app. Now,
Yeah.
when it comes to like gyms that are using our programming, NC Metcon still is the lead horse.
So I guess that's my next thing is like, when does NCFlex potentially find its way on a schedule at the flag at your corporately owned locations, not one of your licensed, you know, partners, you know, kind of scenario, or a gym who's using the NC collective, like using your programming, because they can fucking open up an NCFlex class
100%.
today if they wanted to. But for you guys, the flagship corporately owned NCFit locations, is there a certain like, is there an apex where it's like, fuck, man, over the past 6 months, 400,000 people have fucking done this workout. Let's pilot a class and see how it goes for 6 months.
Yeah. It's very different. You know, it's a very different program. I'm sure you could run it in a class environment. And actually, when I went down to visit On It in Austin, Texas, I was down there and I was hanging out with some of those guys. And I was watching one of their classes go down. And it was really interesting to see how the class went down, because when we think of classes in the CrossFit space, the functional training space, we think of, you know, the music going the whole time, which they had some music going, but it was really light in the background. But we think about, you know, group-led instruction, and we think about people moving at on different stations or different implements during a workout, and kind of like everybody all finishing at the same time at the end of the workout or the time cap. But the way that they were running this class was, you know, the coach was there, the people were doing their thing. They were kind of all doing the same thing, and then they moved on to the next thing after a certain amount of time, right? So I think that if we ever did run NCFlex, first of all, the workouts take anywhere from an hour to an hour and 30 minutes if you're kind of taking your time. But if you're moving at a good clip, you can get done in an hour. It would need to be adjusted a little bit, I think, to make it fit perfectly in a class environment because of equipment issues, and I think how many people would need to be on certain elements, but that wouldn't be too hard to do. I don't know whether it will turn into a class at NCFit or not. I think it could in the future, probably, you know, a bunch of years down the road, but I think right now we're in a really good place with our functional training in the brick and mortar gyms, where we have either, hey, GPP over here, which is a little bit more varied. You have an option for a little bit more wild stuff showing up, and then you have foundational strength and conditioning. And that's kind of where we specialize in gym.
It's interesting. You went the inverse, right? I created tempo training in the group model with the logistics of the group model in my license, 3,000 square feet, 24 people, this amount of equipment. And that was great. But what I found myself, you know, in the creation of doing it solo dolo was I wasn't able to always attend a class time. I try my damnedest to get to like 3 classes a week, but like, it just wasn't always working out. So I'm doing this on my own. And I'm like, well, I'm in here at 2:00. I'm not limited by the logistics of a class.
Yeah.
How would I change this? And those changes, me and my head coach at the time, that's what kind of like what he's evolved into like what I do now, this like tempo training shit, that just like how I prefer to train now. And my point of the intersection of the trajectory I was on with CrossFit and like what I do now, it's not one single time, you know, that you just like a light bulb goes off. It's like a slow and steady drip of me looking at things and going, oh, I kind of got a little carried away there. That's not as cool as I thought it was. It's kind of like when you're fucking 10 beers deep and you're like, oh, that chick's a 9. You're like, homie, that shit's upside down. She's a 6. And, you know, and then you get rid of the beer gogs and you're like, oh, fuck, that's not exactly the move I want to make. That's kind of how I got with CrossFit. I just slowly started to look back on what, again, and a self-admittedly, what I did, what I coached, what I advocated others to do, what I defended back in the day. And I just took a step back, like, all right, I just was a little carried away with it. That's honestly a little extra, or that's not necessary, or this is actually detrimental. Where was your point because you have such a deep background in CrossFit as well. Where was your point, of intersection where you're like, all right, I need to start backing off? Was it a moment in time for you, or just like a longer period, a series of moments?
I don't think I can identify a single moment, but like I was saying earlier in the show, I took a real inventory over how I was feeling about doing this type of training nonstop, doing CrossFit workouts nonstop. And I just didn't want to feel that all the time. And I think that this is somewhat common for people who last as long as I lasted in functional training and CrossFit. And I'm sure that there's some outliers out there, but I think that this is common. I think that people spend 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, I've been doing this, you've been doing this since fucking mid 2000s. So like, that's a long time. And, I think it's also a long time to constantly be putting yourself under the stress of these kinds of workouts and everything for time and the pressure that you might put on yourself. And I also noticed that people around me, and we don't have to name any names, but people around me were so fundamental and so stuck in the singular point of view that this was the only way. And that's so close-minded. And I think that flipped me even more to be like, okay, there's gotta be validity and deep down that there's validity to other types of training. This is a great way to get fit. CrossFit is a fantastic way to get fit. It changed my life. It changed my view on fitness. It's changed hundreds of thousands of people's lives, but it's not the only way. And in fact, it's not necessarily the best way to get strong. It's not the best way to change your aesthetic if that's the number one thing that you want to do. Does it give you a really broad base of exposure to a wide variety of elements that makes you generally fucking pretty dangerous to deal with on a number of different things? Yes, of course it does. But it is not necessarily a panacea for every single goal that every single person has. Can it push you a little bit further towards those? Yeah, it can, because of the general application. It's pretty widely applicable. But I think that there's other opportunities to train and utilize different methods and methodologies and get great results.
My two biggest criticisms now, having done something different inspired by CrossFit, but my own absolute recipe, was the fact that going the way you said, that you didn't like fucking, like, I've never now, since I stopped doing CrossFit, I've never stopped a workout where I just lie flat on my back and have to breathe or heavy for 4 minutes. It doesn't happen. Like, as soon as the workout's done, I'm breathing heavy, but I'm walking around. Like, I'm still standing. I'm not DOA. I'm not roadkill. I believe all that comes from the abuse of the sport aspect and the abuse of the speed aspect in the workout. Like, these two things where every workout has to feel like sport. You mentioned you did Fran a gazillion times. Well, every time you did Fran, you looked at it as if you were literally running the Boston Marathon and last year's time was 2 hours and 45 minutes. And now you're trying to get to 2:30. Like, every one of those workouts becomes a mini little sporting event in your mind. And now you're tackling it as such versus it being like, just getting a workout in today. Like, it's not just a workout anymore.
Yeah. What's widely considered the hallmark of a great CrossFit workout? If you were to ask 10 people out there who really are entrenched in the community, coaches or, athletes, if I said, tell me what the characteristics of somebody who got a great workout are, they're going to say they got a great score and that they are probably somewhat exhausted, right? That they really pushed it. Intensity, yeah. And then the number down on paper, which, yeah, I get it. You can make the argument that both of those things are important, but I think to fundamentally view that your intensity or how tired you are after a workout and your score as being the sole determining factors of whether or not that was a successful workout, I think that's foundationally flawed. I do. I think that we have gotten ourselves tricked into thinking that, and I talked a lot about this with Dr. Sean the other day on a podcast that's going to be releasing. Well, what's today's date? Today is the 8th. It's going to be releasing on the 12th of April. So on Tuesday, the 12th, on the podcast called The Intro. We talked about this a whole lot, where it's like the sport has completely almost pervaded the practice. So now you have all these people who are recreational fitness enthusiasts, these people who have 9-to-5 desk jobs, these people who have families, they have wives, they've got kids, they got shit that they got to do, that they're fucking destroying themselves in workouts only to leave the gym feeling hobbled. That you shouldn't feel like shit after your workouts. Like if that's something you're feeling, I think you have to really examine whether or not maybe you're going a little too hard, or maybe you have to take a step back and think about, hey, how do I want to approach this training a little different?
And so I saw, someone posted, it was, don't, it's a classic CrossFit line. Don't be impressed by volume, be impressed by intensity. And I don't think, again, like these are just two broad words. Like intensity shouldn't mean high intensity, like go hard, die, back on the floor, DOA. But that's what in the CrossFit realm, they downloaded it as. Like intensity is, that metabolic tantrum on the assault bike you throw, right? Like it's a sub, or trying to get a sub 3 minute freight. That's intensity. But I think you can still be impressed. I'm impressed by my intensity over the course, like minimum duration of my workouts now are 60 minutes, bare fucking minimum. I'm impressed by my intensity to go for 60 or 75 or 90 minutes at a moderate intensity. Heart rate at 145 to 152. Like that's impressive as well. Why? And don't be impressed with volume. Why not be impressed with volume? There is something impressive about someone who runs a marathon. There is something impressive of, I love, like right now, and I don't know how you are, but we saw this in bodybuilding. We see this in GVT, German volume training. Volume is one of those things that in CrossFit we don't get. You do Fran, 2159, you got 45 reps in. 45 reps as an ectomorph, right? And for that, a skinny fuck, for all those people who are not into the jargon, is not enough volume for me to get true hypertrophy and put on muscle. I need more volume than that. My ectomorph, naturally skinny bitch ass frame needs that shit. And I think that's one of the reasons why I always gravitated towards longer workouts in CrossFit, because I was like, those were the workouts I felt like I was actually collecting enough repetitions to have a good hypertrophy based change in my body.
Well, volume is the name of the game in hypertrophy, and time under tension is the name of the game in strength building. So let's back up to that quote, because that quote, don't be impressed by volume, be impressed by intensity. I can appreciate that quote in the realm of the CrossFit world, because I think what that quote is getting to, and where I think there might be some misunderstanding of somebody who looks at that quote and goes, oh, that's weird that they would say that, is don't be impressed when you're talking about a CrossFit athlete. Don't be impressed by the CrossFit athlete who's showing you 20 workouts that they have done at 50% of their intensity. Be impressed by the CrossFit athlete who's showing you 5 of their workouts that they have done at their nearly max intensity to really kind of articulate or demonstrate the program of CrossFit, which is constantly varied functional movements at a high intensity, right? And one of the axioms there that a lot of these guys subscribe to is like, more isn't better, better is better, right? James Hobart's really famous for saying that about his training, that just because you're piling more shit onto your, daily whiteboard that you have to do doesn't mean that it's going to be overall better impact for your physiology or your performance. Simply performing your workouts better is probably the best thing for you. So that's what I just wanted to clear up.
Yeah, so let's go to that. Better is better. And my argument there is how better can your movement be at 185 beats per minute? Right? Like,
this is an interesting question.
Yeah, I truly believe if you wanted to just strictly have aesthetics, hypertrophy, and look good naked, you do not care what your actual 1 rep max anything is. You do not care what your CrossFit named workout time is, whatever. You just like, dude, I really don't care about that. I just want to look a certain way, fill out a shirt, and that's it. Then actually working, and let's say someone's max heart rate was 185, working at anything from probably about 173 to 185, I would say is going to put you in the wrong position, because that's a pace in which you're not going to be able to focus. You're not going to be able to accumulate a lot of volume at that pace, number one, which is why Fran's only 45 reps. Nobody has a max heart rate for Murph. Nobody has a max heart rate for Murph, but for Fran, you do. You're not going to be able to collect time under tension. If like you're going to cheat the fuck out of it. And if you do maintain it, that technique's going to break the fuck down at high heart rate. So like, it's just one of those things too, where I just started looking at it, I'm like, man, going ham as fuck for 4 to 7 minutes is cool. I like it on an erg. I like sprinting, like short bursts and stuff like that. But like, fuck, anything else resistance training wise, I don't feel for the average person is going to get enough volume and actual reps to make biological change. It's just going to feed this like masochist fucking sufferfest, like addiction that we have.
So I agree in part, and let me kind of explain a little bit. So I think that the true value of CrossFit is overall volume and time under tension in the program. It's not singular workouts. This is years and years in the making for somebody to develop the type of aesthetic and performance and, movement capability and range of motion, that is something that I think is due to the broad general nature of the program, that it's not specific, that you don't see movements with high redundancy rates over, multiple weeks in a row or multiple days in a week. I think that the program is really successful for people who want to follow this form follows function kind of mindset that, hey, I'm going to put my body through all these different types and modalities of tests. And over time, what I'm going to develop is this really broad and general and inclusive fitness that is backed by a very strong and resilient body that might not be ready for a bodybuilding show in terms of like pure development of all your muscles in the way that you would get on stage and be examined, but like pretty darn probably lean and muscled human frame that's resilient, that's got some better bone density than you first started. And I think a lot of people are okay with that. I think that, because the program is so broad and general, the goals of the program or the outcomes of the program are also pretty broad and general. Like that's one of the trade-offs of doing CrossFit, which I think is really beautiful in a lot of ways. And it allows a lot of people who don't have hyper-specific goals, whether they're hyper-specific aesthetic goals or hyper-specific performance goals, to really get a lot of benefits out of a program that can be very fun because it constantly changes and it's done in a group environment. So you have the support of people around you. And I think to me, that's really what's beautiful about that pursuit. I kind of got lost on your question a little bit.
No, it's good. Well, which is good. I want to ping back. I like that. Like, this is why I wanted you on here to talk about this and to have fun discussions and even differences of opinion on this. I look at CrossFit as overly redundant. How much squatting is done in CrossFit? From I don't care, period, just redundant. How much squatting is done in CrossFit? I would say squatting makes up over 85% of the lower body work you would see in any given CrossFit programming. Like, we just name out the top 25 exercises: thrusters and cleans and overhead squats and full snatches and front squats and back squats and wall balls. Like, everything is double knee flexion based work. When have you ever, maybe once at the games, maybe at the open once a year, single dumbbell overhead lunge, like RDL, like you don't see a ton of like hinging. We see deadlifts all the fucking time. And again, it's a great movement, deadlift, right? It's the king, it's the powerhouse. I just see the redundancy. Everything's vertical pressing or pulling and very little horizontal, like a minimal horizontal pressing. Okay. Maybe push-ups, whatever it may be. I see a lot of opportunities for variety in CrossFit that doesn't exist. And I criticize the definition: constantly varied functional movements at high intensity. I believe it needs to move to constantly. It's a perfect definition, almost constantly varied functional movements at varying or relative intensities and tempo. Because that's the one element in all of strength and conditioning. The only thing that's left out of CrossFit right now is time under tension, specific time under tension. The only thing they left out.
Well, I think in terms of core human motor patterns of pull, push, squat, press, and jump, extension and flexion of the hip, I think that you're correct. I think that you can't argue that those aren't overly programmed in a CrossFit program, in a traditional CrossFit program. That's the bulk of what happens. And that's why I think, when somebody looks at a CrossFit program who's outside of the CrossFit space and they go, oh, you guys, like, all you're doing is your shoulders, like your shoulder joints and your hips, like you're hinging every single day this week. Well, not every single day, but a lot of the time during this week, we're going to hinge. And then you have people point out the front squat and they're like, that's a hinge too. Anyway, it's a whole nother discussion. But, you know, in terms of what I was talking about when I meant redundancy, is that CrossFit's not a linear progression, right? Like it's not a linear program. It's not designed to say, hey, we're doing 7x5 this week, and then 5x5 this week, and then 3x5 this week, and then 1x5 this week. Like, it doesn't work that way. There are some people who incorporate things into their program, cycle-based strength and all that kind of stuff. But like, it is, for all intents and purposes, like we both just said, it is varied. And for some people it's random because they're just making up workouts, which is crazy. But like, you know, that to me is where I don't see the redundancy. Yes, you might squat a lot in a week, but like, you might be overdoing your squat motor pattern, but you're not getting like the type of redundancy that you would get in a linear progression of a back squat.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, I do. And you know, the older I got, the more I'm like, I need less I need less movements. Like, I don't need all the fucking movements. Right. And I like the one thing, and I talk to the kids that are at the CrossFit gym that I go to now, and because they see what I do off to the side, and it's always, well, man, it's interesting. Why do you do that? I'm like, because there's no fucking rotational core work at CrossFit. There's none. There's no diagonal plane work like a landmine press. And you know what just drives me nuts? Pressing a barbell overhead is functional. It's not really. You've never pressed anything in the world. Your child, the suitcase into the overhead bin, locked out like this where you couldn't see it anymore. You push it in a diagonal. Everyone goes in a diagonal. Overhead is not functional. Your cabinet, you don't reach to your cabinet and grab it here. You reach up to a cabinet here. So every fuck telling me that overhead pressing is 100% functional, I'm like, you don't understand. You just heard that on a level 1, you downloaded it, and now that's your fucking dogma bullshit talking.
Well, I think that the argument for functionality behind the overhead press is the fact that you have full extension and range of the shoulder joint, right? And you're completely supported underneath you by your muscular and skeletal system, right?
Great. And
you have the midline working and all that kind of stuff. So if you can press, arguably, if you can press in a singular line up and overhead with the support of your midline, you should, with some practice, be able to press out in front as well, right?
But to a negative, like, give me, and you, I mean, anyone can do this. I'm sure the first time you fucked around with any landmine shit, like, holy fuck, that's a lot harder.
You don't have your midline underneath.
100%. And so, yes, I agree. If we want to define functional as it's actually a proper, healthy range of motion, but we know that's not what it is. CrossFit advertises it. The gyms advertise it constantly. Like, this is how you move in life. I'm like, that's not actually how you move in life. Like, for that particular movement, like, it's not.
We all, you know, this is by extension, you get into this conversation about people arguing that the bicep curl is not functional, but the overhead squat is functional. You know,
I think the bicep is very functional.
I know. I believe so too. I'm just saying that, like, I think this terminology about functionality has, if you could take this argument all the way down to the fact that, like, why are you ever using a barbell? A barbell is nearly completely not functional in and of itself, because you never encounter an object in life that's completely symmetrical with a thinner radius of a center bar that you can now lift the object.
7 millimeters diameter.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, like, you can kind of go a whole bunch of different ways.
You can go deep down that rabbit hole.
Deep down the functionality rabbit hole. But
why do you think CrossFit's has ignored tempo?
Oh, that's a good question. I can tell you for a fact that we don't ignore it at NCFit. It finds its place into our programming for both NC Metcon, NCX, and NCFlex. I think that if I had to guess why you don't see tempo work ever programmed, is because of the intensity discussion, and that speed has somehow become confused with the only way that you're able to generate results or generate intensity, which is untrue. You can generate intensity through speed, through volume, and through loading, right? And time under tension, which is mostly what we're talking about in tempo. I don't know why it hasn't taken more of a foothold in more CrossFit programs.
One event in the open, 2009, I think, and I remember seeing Jason do it. It was the parallel hold. It was an L hold on parallettes. They stacked plates underneath the heels of a couple inches off. So if your heel touched those plates, no rep and you're done. Max effort hold. And that was the only time I've ever seen tempo applied in the competitive side. Now, what a lot of people have told me, and Andrew Charlesworth,
Yes.
So I just had Andrew on here, and he's a fucking, I love the dude. He's a CrossFit diehard, right? He's got the tattoo on him. So me and him are arguing, the truth here. And he's like, well, it's also from a spectator thing. I'm like, that gets into the whole, like, is this a fitness program or is this a fucking sport? And by the way, there's a lot of sports that are slow and boring. It's called golf and baseball. A lot of motherfuckers watch that.
Well, in terms of competition, tempo would be really, really hard to implement without changing how you're judging the events, without adding like audible beeps for people as they're squatting to hit certain positions or pause or get down to a full range of motion below parallel. And you have to wait for the beep to stand back up, because tempo involves accounting. And a lot of the accounting is either happening in your own head or it's happening where somebody's watching you and counting for you.
You got to,
right?
okay, at the sport level, fuck it. Your judge is there. He's counting reps. Why can't he? Okay, let's say it was Fran.
Why would you? Well, first of all, let me ask you, why would you fucking want to see somebody squat in a sport where they're controlling a 2-second descent or a 3-second descent with sub max weight? What kind of benefit, or what kind of, like, how would you get your jollies watching that in terms of viewership? Like, what would you? You're looking at somebody squatting 225, going 3 seconds on the way down. They have a hard enough time getting people to watch this shit doing 300 or fucking 400 pounds squatting their absolute max.
Correct. So if we're talking the goal of the conversation is to get as many people to watch it as possible, I would say that's not the goal. The goal would be less clothing, right? Like, that's going to get more people to watch, right? But from a difficulty perspective, I never thought tempo was a thing I wanted to see or I thought was interesting until I was at a competition, like a local throwdown, and I saw a dude while everyone was butterflying pull-ups. And again, he had nice little short levers, do like the most minimal C-kip pull-up, and he'd pull that chin. And I'm not talking that bullshit pull-up everyone does where they lift their chin to get it over the bar. He actually pulled that shit over the bar. 1, 2, he'd push away very lightly, right back up. 1, 2, push away. And as I watched all these fucks flounder on the ball with their fucking butterfly, I watched him and I was more impressed by that stoic, tight ability to replicate each rep. You watch the butterfly, you watch those thrusters happen, right? Or the back squats at 225 that are going fast. Rep 1 through whatever looks good. The last ones are starting to fall off. Someone who has to stick to tempo, all of them, that's the thing that's so impressive, is rep 1 and rep 50 look fucking exactly alike. And if a judge can count reps, why can't the judge, let's say it was Fran at the games and the chin gets over the bar and you have to hold chin over bar for a 3-second count before you're allowed to come back down. I'd like to see that fucking Fran happen and watch people get decimated. Like, man, he's got a 220 Fran, but when he had to do it with the tempo, he went to 850.
Yeah, I don't think it's imminently watchable, honestly. I think that it would be a tough thing to watch. I also think that the sport of CrossFit is, like we've been saying, a lot about speed, a lot about loading, and a lot about volume, and not in speed in a way that we're going to slow things down, but speed in a way that they want to speed things up to make it sexy to watch.
Bro, marathon row.
Yeah,
marathon row. What's entertaining to watch about that?
Well, the fact that you have people doing something that they've never seen before, I guess. But I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I mean, correct. And so, but let's just stick, because you and me, I think the one thing, let's take the visibility and like this, like what ESPN would want, right? From a
Sure.
attractiveness. But we talk about just from a training perspective. Is everything I've been watching you do since you started, cooking up, and I saw the posts and everything way before it became official and it became an actual program. You were playing around and fucking around with things that definitely don't appear as sexy, but very fucking potent. And if the goal
100%.
is, again, getting people looking good naked, all that good shit, getting them fitter and stronger, I believe that things like tempo, things like alternative movements, and that we're generally not seen in this typical CrossFit barbell strength and conditioning world, I believe that just more light has to be shined on it. And I truly do. I think tempo is going to be something that every gym in 5 years, if you and me had this podcast, nobody would listen. It's like, everybody does tempo. It'd be like now if we talked about like as some common movement now, that everyone's like, oh yeah, everyone does that already. It's not interesting.
This might be controversial for me to say, but I actually think CrossFit would be a more effective protocol if performed at around 60 to 75%, maybe more than 60, maybe 65 to 75% of your max intensity. And when I say effective, I mean effective in terms of producing an outcome of, a higher actual aerobic capacity, a higher anaerobic impact, better muscle building, better strength, better awareness, all the components of fitness being more finely polished. If you did that, so if you had somewhere in that kind of sub-max intensity, if you had eliminated any sort of momentum-based gymnastics as well. So taking the kipping pull-up out, taking the kipping push-up out, taking the kipping muscle-up out, I think that those movements, yes, they demonstrate great awareness about your body, but a lot of what you're doing is generating momentum through your lower body and your midline and throwing yourself up and over an object. So minimal muscular involvement in getting yourself over the bar or up on top of the rings, and much higher involvement of momentum through your very powerful hips. Now, the thing that I get frustrated about these days, and one of the main things that we do in NCFlex is we do a fucking ton of strict pull-ups, ton of strict pushing, ton of them. I don't understand this prioritization of the kipping pull-up anymore. And I think that it's just a leftover of the sexiness that people were really, really hoping to experience or see when doing these workouts. It's just cardio. It's momentum and cardio. So why are people continuing to do them? I think it's just a relic.
And when you see it now, aren't you less impressed? Like if I watch someone do 30 unbroken kipping pull-ups versus I watch someone do 3 sets of 10 strict, I'm more impressed by 3 sets of 10. Oh, all day.
Honestly, I can't remember the last time I watched somebody do 30 kipping pull-ups, because I've seen more people do kipping pull-ups for my lifetime than I would ever want to expose anybody else to in their lifetime. So no, yes, I am much more impressed from a strength and awareness and a just general kinesthetic awareness about your body weight on a bar, of being able to pull yourself up in a slow, controlled motion and lower yourself back down. That is 100% harder than doing kipping pull-ups.
I made that post today and I did. In 2017, I quit doing burpees the way we've all done burpees forever. I stopped, it wasn't about like this cardio thing. Every burpee, if I'm going to be down there, I'm going to do a strict push-up. That's every time, forever and ever. And guess what? When you do it fast enough, you get very good fast twitch pliament. You pop up off the fucking ground. You can do them faster than someone doing that belly slap, the lazy burpee, as I call it. But like things like that, like I see opportunities for people to try something a little different, do something. It generally involves some kind of tempo or a vary movement. And the amount of resistance you hear is, you're right, it goes back to the dogma. Well, burpees aren't for that. They're for conditioning. Your heart rate still gets up. It still gets up incredibly high. Yeah, well, what happens, Stuart, if someone has the strength deficit and if someone has a strength deficit at the push-up, let's call it the most basic element of the movement, because let's admit it, kids, 50% of the burpee is gravity. 50% is not you. You're going down to the ground. Let's not really give you credit for that part. The real part of the burpee that exhausts people is the press off. So yeah, put their hands on a table or a box, let them do a hands elevated kind of modification, whatever it may be. But still, and real fitness people understand this, not weekend, I got a cert and I opened the gym fitness people. Overweight, untrained individuals do not need Tabata sprints. They don't need 1RMs. They don't need any of that. They need low training age, needs high volume of repetitions at low to moderate intensity, because they have a low training age. It inverses as you get to higher training ages and things like that. But I see people that 45 pounds overweight doing Tabata sprints. That fucking lady, Sally, should be doing fucking 45 minutes of steady state cardio. And that's 100% what she should be doing. Her number one issue is not her anaerobic system. It's the fact that she's 40 fucking pounds overweight.
Well, this is an interesting conversation to follow the thread on, because, when I was talking to Sean, like I was saying earlier, he kind of believes that, and I'm paraphrasing, that CrossFit should specialize in elite fitness for people who want to express it at more of a sport level, that they should not necessarily be catering to the Marys of the world out there and the Sallys of the world out there who, are not appropriate candidates for that kind of intensity right now. that they should focus more on people who want to and are able to express the program in the way that it's written, and kind of follow the sport aspect of it a little bit more.
Yeah. Program for the best, scale for that kind of mantra.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, similar to some of the stuff that we were discussing earlier, I think this comes down to fundamentalism. I think it comes down to people being so ardent and so unwilling to accept that, you can alter or adjust the chart, or you can make some adaptations or changes to what you see to best fit what the person needs, both maybe physiologically and how they walk into the gym that day, but also just in the moment, what does that person need that day from you? And to only be able to go one speed, to only be able to administer fitness in this one way, where the only thing that matters are your reps, your rounds, your time, and your load, I think is a miscarriage of fitness for people. I really do. I don't think that you get this thing from people out there where they go, CrossFit is for everybody. Everybody should do CrossFit. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. And I think that you'd be more successful if you admitted, if you understood that where the limits of your fitness expertise ends. That's a phrase that I'm borrowing from Sean, is that, like, you have to understand that there are some people that this is not the best fit for, whether or not it's because they don't want to, or their goals don't align, or they're just not in the right place, whether it's physically, mentally, or emotionally, or socially, to handle this kind of experience right now. And I think if you're honest in that way, you'll probably be more successful at attracting the people who this is the right type of training for them.
Yeah, and I believe Sean also, he's made this statement, I believe, and I hope I'm pinging him with the right one. We shouldn't be programming exercises. That's too specific to program for a group of people. You should be programming like movement patterns. Imagine at NCFit, if everyone who came in had to do some level of one-on-one with a coach, where you literally taught them, like, this is our toolbox of all our different movements. We have single leg knee flexion, hinging, vertical, pressing, horizontal, whatever. You taught them it all over some course of personal training sessions. And then when workouts are in, every day has a lower piece, a upper piece, a midline piece, and a conditioning piece. All right. You guys know your options. Today's is meant to be heavy lower body. It's meant to be lighter, higher time under tension, upper body. Midline work is meant to be high volume, low time under tension. And then conditioning is meant to be a minute at sustainable effort. And like, people just came in and picked, like, I feel like doing lunges today. I feel like doing RDLs today. I feel like doing deadlifts today, and let people pick their journey. Now, I understand in the commercial world, people don't want to pick their journey. They want you to fucking just tell them what to do. They want to get in and get fit, get out. I understand. But how do you feel about that? That we should be programming movement patterns and allowing the client to pick the one that's best for them, or with your assistance as a coach and your guidance, versus programming specific movements. And then when Sally can't do it, giving her a pat on the head, like, it's okay, we're going to give you this PVC pipe and a box of squat too.
I think people should be responsible for how they want to run their business, and they should have a good frame of reference of what they want the fitness experience to be within their gym. And if they believe that that's the best expression for what they want to deliver to their clients, and they are upfront with the people as they're coming through the door about this is the experience that you're going to get, then that's fine. I think I differ from Sean insofar that, I think that he might hint that there's some irresponsibility associated with programming workouts that are an AMRAP 15 with 10 push press, 20 box jumps, and 30 double unders. I don't agree that that's irresponsible. I don't. I think that if that's the experience to which your members signed up for, and they're aware, and you've told them, and they have an understanding that, hey, this is how we operate. These are the kinds of workouts that we program for a group. And yes, they can be adjusted, and we can manicure it to fit your specific fitness journey, and your coach will be there if you're having any sort of pains or aches, or you have an injury that we need to work around, or if you have any sort of pre-existing condition, obviously we can work through those as well. I think that that's a fine and justifiable way to produce like we were saying before, a generally fit person over time. Now, is the specificity of the goals that a singular person might have, if they say, hey, I want to come in and I want to do X, I want to run my best 10K, and I need to do that in the next 2 months. Is the general physical preparedness program really the best program for them to achieve that goal? Probably not. Will they get closer to it? versus doing nothing, 100%. But could they do something that would be more specifically beneficial for them to achieve that very narrow and singularly focused goal? Yes, I do believe that they could. But I differ from Sean insofar in saying that everybody should be doing it differently. I don't think that that's true. I think that there's a lot of value to the group fitness environment, and I think that if you take a more of like a macro view about what a lot of people really need, a lot of people really need just to show up to the fucking gym every day and just do something and do it with people who are like-minded and have a fucking smile on their face and interact with other people socially, and then leave and go home and eat a healthy meal. That's what most people need to do.
Yeah, I want to go to two things that you mentioned, like the group fitness model and doing it there. Here's the thing with yes, the community and the camaraderie and all that happens in group fitness. I love it. It's great. There's motivation. Trust me, if you go to an open gym model, right, and you go at 6 p.m. and that's the busy hour and everyone's doing their own thing, trust me, and you know this, you've worked out at a Globo gym or maybe you were just as motivated, even though nobody's watching you. Like, no one really gives a fuck. Maybe they do, but no one's really watching you. Other people are working out around you and you're like, oh, I know that guy. Like, you get to know people who come at the same times. There is community there as well. Like, I don't put this on that, like,
I agree.
Yep. So
different, but community.
Correct. Yeah. And you know what I like about that, like even now when I do it, it's that I'm doing my own thing and I get community. I get to talk to somebody. Oh, what are you doing today? That's cool. Blah, blah, blah. How you been? Whatever. We're not like, there's no competition. We can all exist in there because we're all doing different shit and we all can knock each other up at the end, not really knowing what the other person did or what their goals are, versus once we instill this sport like competition, like, oh, did you RX it? Oh, I did. I saw her. I counted her reps. She didn't do that many. Like, you get that really they get that bullshit. Then I want to go to time domain because you mentioned NCFlex. 90 minutes potentially, and if you're really, getting after, you might be able to get done in an hour. I found that my training is the same way. I want longer duration. Why do you feel, how do I phrase this? 7-minute abs, we all made fun of back in the day, right? It was the butt of a joke. It was in, there's something about Mary, you got it, whatever. But 3-minute Fran, we don't make fun of. We put that up on a pedestal. We'll fucking, give you a trophy for a 3-minute Fran. Where do you see duration of exercise evolving? Because you mentioned a 15-minute workout, right? Like a 15-minute boom, 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 boom. I agree. 15 minutes is probably really it's a decent time workout domain. However, that's vastly different than what you're cooking up for yourself today and what I'm cooking up for myself. I believe 15 minutes is not probably the best time domain for, again, fitness and aesthetics. For sport, I think cramming as much as you can in 15 minutes is really a good thing to do to develop muscular endurance and be able to build up that, that glycolytic engine. Where do you see, because what you're doing now is obviously way longer than 15 minutes. What I'm doing now is way longer. How do you view time duration of workouts? Is it because you're cramming so much shit in that's just the result? Because I've looked at your programs. You guys aren't putting 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag.
No, we don't. But I think that, I had a conversation with one of our collective gyms earlier this week about just this topic, essentially. And we do have more volume within an average day than I think other traditional CrossFit.com would have for sure. We do more volume than they would have in a single day for sure. What we're looking for is a holistic experience. And we want every single day the athlete to walk out of the gym feeling like they got their money's worth that day. And, some days might have a longer warm up, some skill work or strength work, and then a shorter workout. But I still believe on that day that holistically, you got a great workout. Maybe you pushed it a little bit more. You got some additional volume in the warm up. Maybe you got your strength work in prior to your shorter workout. And for us, short is sub 10 minutes. We have some workouts that we'll put out there that will be below that. But generally, if we see something that's sub 10 minutes, there's 99.9% of the time another element to that class that will give them at least another 10 or 15 minutes of time under tension or work, so that they're getting on average during that day 25 minutes, 20 minutes.
This is for NCFlex we're referring to?
No. This is for NC Metcon and NCX, because the comparison, they're hard to compare. it's hard to compare a functional strength and bodybuilding program where, yes, the name of the game is going to be volume and time under tension, to a general physical preparedness program where the name of the game is somewhat volume, but really kind of relative intensity and variance. Those are the levers that you're pulling in the GPP style programming. And again, like I said earlier, over a longer timeline, that's okay in GPP because you're getting enough exposure to all these different elements and all these different things that at the end of this low trajectory, distant horizon thing, you come out with this general fitness that over the course of years, you've experienced a lot of different things, and hopefully you've developed capacity that is has a pretty wide breadth. But in a bodybuilding program or a functional strength program, a traditional strength program, the goals are much more narrow. I mean, we are not necessarily chasing every and any modality. We're sticking to certain types of training, certain types of looks, certain types of volume, and you can accelerate to a narrower goal faster through that type of program.
And what I'm saying is, I think the person that walks in NCFit,
Mm-hmm.
who is just looking to look good naked, add more muscle, reduce body fat, would be better served doing like what you do with NCFlex or what I do with tempo training. Telling them to do a 15-minute workout, the only way a 15-minute workout works is with intensity and speed and that sport-like mechanic. We can all admit, out of a 15-minute workout, everyone listening, don't you fucking lie to yourself. The first third, you look good. The second third, the wheel, every couple reps again shaky. The last third, if you're moving with real intensity, the technique isn't what you would be super proud of. If someone were to show a clip of your workout, you wouldn't want it from the last fucking third of the workout. So now you do that over 5 years, and you've taken someone and collected volume of training where maybe half to 2/3 of the workout is a little fucking shaky. It's not really good. When you look at a really good fit person, they're stoic from rep 1 to 100 at a high intensity, right? Like they look great
Somewhat.
no matter what. Yeah, that
Yeah.
takes a while to develop. And I just think like we have these normal people coming in the CrossFit gyms, and we're like signing them up for sport without even asking. Like, oh yeah, well we do, it's sport based. Whereas if you just ask people, what do you want? I want to look good naked. I want to blah, blah, blah. What you do at, I would say NCFlex would be like the program to fucking have at the group fitness model.
You could make that argument. But I also think that the argument that you make that we can make on the community-based fitness GPP style program is that we're signing people up for supersetting. That's really what we're doing with these workouts. A lot of these workouts are high intensity interval training, or AKA supersetting types of workouts, where you're taking one exercise and you're building another exercise after, you're building another exercise after that. And one of the main reasons why people, even in the bodybuilding world and the strength world, like supersetting is because of the time constraint, the time that you're able to get your workout in.
Efficiency. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. It shrinks significantly. And I do think that there's something to, this GPP style training, the group atmosphere, learning skills, doing these workouts together in the community-based fitness environment, and getting something in an efficient amount of time. Because honestly, most people don't have 90 minutes that they're going to dedicate to training.
You're
and
right.
I look at these people out there talking about like, oh, you should do zone 2 cardio for 45 minutes, 4 times a week. I was like, whoa, hold on. Fuck, 45 minutes for 4 times a week? That's fucking crazy even for me to think about adding on in. Plus you're going to do resistance training. Plus you're going to do flexibility. Plus you're going to be in the sauna. Plus you're going to ice plunge and all this other crap. I think it's overload. And this is one of my criticisms of some of the other people out there of like, hey, 30 minutes of cardio every day. That is probably more than most people do in a single day, honestly. So if you can get them into, this is what you're going to bite off. You're going to bite off a 1-hour class for 4 times a week. That's what we want to see you in here, 4 times a week for 1 hour. I think that for most people, they can wrap their minds around that, and that they can have a really great result from that training, albeit not specific,
Sure.
but a really great result.
And I think you're right. I think the group model, because 4 times they're booking 4 appointments with the app. They're showing they're driving 4 times, they're driving back 4 times. For the person who's working out doing NCFlex, like in a garage like you, or working out at an open gym model like me, I think there's the opportunity, like if they have the freedom to go and incorporate more training into their shit, because they're not doing it as part of like, you sign up for group fitness is because you need the accountability, a good portion of it, right? You sign up for solo dolo in the garage or open gym stuff, you're self-motivated. And I think like, that self-motivated person could hit 30 minutes of additional cardio if they so wanted and it aligned with their goals and blah, 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 in a week versus the group class needing scheduling individual. You're right. I think, that's going to be overkill. But yeah, man, it's interesting. I've loved watching the evolution of what you've been doing with NCFlex. I'm not gonna lie, man. I would love to hear and see in a post one day that you guys are, piloting this shit in a new, partner location or doing whatever in the group model. Cause I think you're right. I think it goes station based. I think the equipment allocation looks completely different than a CrossFit gym. And I think it would look really fucking cool.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that it's a cool vision to have maybe one day. For now, if you're interested in checking out NCFlex and the workouts that I do, you can find them on the NCFit app, or you can follow me at MDV_FIT on Instagram. It's been a hell of a lot of fun, really is. And, the way that I use NCFlex, because I am pursuing jujitsu super hard right now. I train jujitsu 3 or 4 times a week, and at least 3 of those sessions are intense. Usually all 4 of them are intense, but I use NCFlex where I pick 3 days. I look to squat, I look to hinge or pull, and I look to push or press in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes that squat turns into a unilateral lower body lunge or something. But those are the 3 days. I look to get those 3 days in as my functional strength, and then I back those up by usually doing 2 more lower body focus days and then 1 upper body focus day. But that's how I utilize the program.
Between you and Jason and your both shared hobby of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, will there be an NCFit like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specific? Because I got to imagine like for Brazilian, and again, I've never rolled ever. I got to imagine like long, heavy sled pushes would be great for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for when you're like tied up with somebody and you're just crushing your CNS for long periods of time. Or when we talk about isometric holds, you talk about like the bicep curl being functional. Fuck that. Long duration isometric bicep holds when you've got somebody in a hold and you've got to hold on for dear life. And I'm speaking ignorantly because I don't do it, but am I somewhere in the ballpark?
You're close. I think what's really interesting about strength and conditioning and the jiu-jitsu practice, probably martial arts in general, but I know the jiu-jitsu conversation much more closely, is that there are so many different opinions about what is the best type of off-mat training for on-mat performance. There's people out there who talk and swear by kettlebells. There's people out there who talk and swear by CrossFit. There's people out there who talk and swear by bodybuilding. There's people out there talking swear by bands and other odd object equipment. And then there's some people out there who say nothing. They say you shouldn't do anything that detracts from your ability to be flexible and be dynamic on the mat. And doing this, getting more bulky, more musculature is going to take away from that. I think where Jason and I fall on this, it really depends. It depends on where you're at in your jiu-jitsu journey and whether or not like you're highly, highly competitive or whether or not you're somebody who's like an enthusiast, just like a
Weekend warrior.
Yeah, weekend warrior. It also depends on what you kind of need off the mat and managing your time to get the most bang from your buck. Because if you're going to jiu-jitsu 3 times a week or 4 times a week, that's usually a 90-minute commitment in and of itself. So if you're adding in even 2 more training days, or you're adding in 3 training days and you're kind of mixing and doing a double day one day, and it can be a lot to consider. There's a lot of variables to consider. Again, the way that I do it, my goals right now are, 1, like you, want to look really fucking good. I want to look great. And I think that that's a fantastic goal for a lot of people out there. I have aesthetic goals. And number 2, I have goals that I want to be generally stronger than almost anybody that I touch on the mat who's around my weight or 20 or 30 pounds heavier than me. That's where I want to be. I think that that's a huge advantage for me. And I want to be able to breathe through all that stuff and never be the person who's getting choked out because my gas tank has left the building. So those 3 days that I do for NCFlex, I'm focusing on keeping and developing that strength. And then I'm also adding in that zone 2 cardio on a couple of those days to make sure that I can still breathe through all that. And of course, jiu-jitsu is very aerobic in and of itself.
Dude, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. I know it chewed up more time than what we had signed up, but guys,
All
listen,
good.
if you don't listen to the intro, MDV's podcast is great. I love it. It's like from a fitness perspective, and I don't like listening to people talk about fitness a lot. I do like listening to you talk about fitness.
I
So
appreciate that.
absolutely,
Likewise.
man. Brother, thank you again. And we'll do this again sometime soon.
Hell yeah.